At my engagement party, my best friend pulled my fiancé aside and whispered secrets about me in front of everyone, making me question whether she was ever truly my friend, and I cheated on Sarah 3 weeks before our engagement party. Not physically, but emotionally, and in the moment it happened, I told it meant nothing. Just harmless texts with my coworker Jessica, late-night conversations that started professional and turned personal. I convinced I was just being friendly, that Sarah was too stressed with wedding planning to notice I needed attention too. The text started innocent enough. Working late again. Became understand me better than anyone. Became things were different. I never said I loved Jessica, but I felt something I hadn't felt with Sarah in months. The excitement of someone new wanting to know everything about me. The validation of being chosen, even if it was wrong. Sarah found the messages 2 days before our engagement party. Not because she was snooping, but because my phone lit at 2 a.m. with Jessica saying, "Can't stop thinking about what said earlier." Sarah picked it thinking it was work, and instead found months of conversations where I complained about her, shared intimate details of our relationship problems, and basically had an emotional affair with a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. The confrontation was brutal. Sarah didn't scream or throw things. She just sat on our bed holding my phone and cried silently while reading through everything. Each swipe of her finger was like a deeper into whatever trust we'd built over 4 years together. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were empty in a way that made my stomach drop to the floor. "How long?" she whispered, and I couldn't even answer honestly. Because the truth was it started the moment I felt taken for granted, which might have been months ago. The truth was I'd been checking out of our relationship emotionally while she planned our future, choosing flowers and venues while I chose to confide in another woman about how suffocated I felt. She called off the engagement that night, but then changed her mind the next morning. Not because she forgave me but because she said 200 people were already coming to celebrate us, and she didn't want her family by canceling. I should have insisted we postpone. I should have fought harder for her to take time to process. Instead I was relieved she wanted to go through with it, because I was a coward who didn't want to face the consequences of my choices. The day of the party, Sarah moved through our apartment like a ghost. She put on her dress, did her makeup, smiled when her mom called, but she wouldn't look at me directly. Every interaction felt performed, like we were actors playing the roles of a happy couple for an audience that had no idea our relationship was by a thread. My best friend Marcus had been my wingman since college, the guy who knew all my secrets and had always had my back through every decision. He was supposed to give a speech that night, something funny and heartfelt about how he'd watch me grow and find my person. I'd even helped him write parts of it weeks earlier, back when I thought I deserved the happiness he was going to describe. But Marcus had also been acting strange lately. Short texts, declined invitations to out, weird looks when we were all together. I figured he was just busy with work, but as we got ready for the party, I realized he'd probably picked on the tension between Sarah and me. Marcus was observant like that, always reading the room better than everyone else. The venue looked perfect. Sarah's mom had outdone herself with flowers and lighting that made everything look like a fairy tale. Our families mingled, laughing and sharing stories about how they'd known we were meant to be together. Sarah's dad kept clapping me on the back and talking about how proud he was to have me as a son-in-law soon. Each compliment felt like acid in my throat. I watched Sarah work the room, graceful and charming with everyone who congratulated her. She was everything I'd fallen in love with, smart and kind and beautiful, and I'd thrown it all away for the temporary high of someone new paying attention to me. Standing there in my suit, accepting congratulations I didn't deserve, I felt like the biggest alive. Marcus arrived late, which wasn't like him. He'd been my best man when I asked Sarah to marry me, the first person I called with the good news. But tonight he looked uncomfortable, checking his phone constantly and avoiding eye contact when I tried to talk to him. When I asked if everything was okay, he just said, "We need to talk later," and walked away to get a drink. The first few hours went smoothly enough. Speeches from our parents, toast from college friends, the usual celebration of love that felt hollow when knew the truth underneath. I kept catching glimpses of Sarah's face when she thought no one was looking, and the sadness there made me want to disappear. She was performing happiness for everyone else while dying inside, and it was my fault. Then came the moment that changed everything. Marcus had been drinking more than usual, and I could see him getting worked about something. He kept staring at Sarah and me, then looking away like he couldn't stand what he was seeing. When he finally approached us near the end of the night, his jaw was set in that way that meant he was about to do something he'd been thinking about for way too long. "Sarah," he said, and his voice was loud enough that people nearby started paying attention. "Can I talk to for a second?" But he didn't wait for her to answer. Instead, he looked right at me and said, "About what kind of man really marrying?" The music seemed to fade as more people turned to look at us. Sarah's face went white and I felt my world start to tilt off its axis. Marcus wasn't just an emotional, he was about to destroy everything in the most public way possible and I had no idea why. "Marcus, don't," I said, but it came out desperate and pathetic, which only confirmed to everyone watching that whatever he was about to say was true. Sarah looked between us, confused but already bracing for impact. She knew that tone, the way conversations sounded right before they ruined. "She deserves to know what been too," Marcus said, loud enough now that our families were starting to gather around. "About Jessica. About all the lies he was, but not enough to not know exactly what he was doing. This was calculated, planned, designed for maximum damage." My heart stopped. How did Marcus know about Jessica? I'd never told him about the emotional affair, never mentioned her name, but looking at his face I realized he knew everything, probably more than Sarah had found in those text messages. The question was how and why he was choosing this moment, in front of everyone we loved, to detonate my. "Marcus, please," Sarah whispered, but she was already pulling away from me. She could see the guilt written all over my face, could read the panic in my eyes. After 4 years together she knew when I was caught. "He's been having an affair," Marcus announced to the crowd, and the words hit the room like a conversation stopped. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Sarah's mom gasped audibly, and my dad's face went from confused to furious in about 2 seconds. The fairy tale venue suddenly felt like a courtroom, and I was on trial for my. "It's not what think," I started but Marcus me off. Oh, it's exactly what they think. Months of sneaking around, lying to face while plan this party, complaining about to another woman while picked out wedding dresses. His voice was getting louder, more aggressive. Tell them about the hotel, man. Tell them about last Tuesday. Hotel, last Tuesday. I felt the drain from my face as I realized Marcus wasn't just talking about the text messages Sarah had found. He knew something else, something I'd forgotten or blocked out. And then it hit me like a truck: the work conference in downtown Portland last week. The drinks after with colleagues, Jessica suggesting we get a nightcap at the hotel bar. I remembered now. Too much flirting, ending in her room talking until 3 a.m. Nothing physical happened, I swear, but we'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Deep conversations about our relationships, admissions about attraction. A moment where we almost before I pulled away. I'd convinced it was just a close call, not a betrayal. But Marcus somehow knew about it. How to know about that? I whispered, but my voice carried in the silence. Everyone was staring at us now, including the catering staff who'd stopped serving to watch the drama unfold. Because Jessica is my sister, Marcus said, and my entire world exploded. Jessica was Marcus's sister, the coworker I'd been emotionally cheating with, the woman who'd been sympathetic and understanding and available, was my best friend's sister. How had I not known? How had I missed something so obvious? But then I remembered Jessica used her married name at work, had never talked about her family much, always redirected when I asked personal questions about her background. Sarah was looking at me like she'd never seen me before. We're with her? Physically with her. Her voice was barely whisper, but it threw the crowd's murmur like a blade. No, I said quickly. I mean, we didn't sleep together. We just talked, it was just conversation. But even as I said it, I knew how pathetic it sounded, as talking until 3 a.m. in another woman's hotel room, while my fiancé was at home planning our engagement party. Just talking. Marcus laughed bitterly. She told me everything, man. How complained about Sarah being boring. How said felt trapped in this relationship. How wished met her before got serious with anyone else. Each revelation was another nail in my coffin, another bridge burning behind me. The crowd was getting restless now. Sarah's dad looked like he wanted to punch me. My mom was crying quietly in the corner. Our friends from college were whispering among themselves, probably thinking back to all the times they defended me as a good guy, a loyal friend, someone worth trusting. Why? Sarah asked, and she wasn't asking Marcus. She was asking me directly, for the first time since this nightmare started. Why would do this to us? Why would let me plan this party, invite everyone, stand here and smile while knowing I'd already checked out? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Because the truth was unselfish and would only hurt more. I cheated because I was bored. Because the routine of our relationship had started to feel suffocating and I craved excitement. Because when someone new showed interest in me, I chose to feed my ego instead of work on what we had together. Because he's selfish. Marcus answered for me. Because he's always been selfish. Remember junior year when he hooked with that girl liked? Remember when he borrowed money from and never paid it back? Remember every time he made a promise he couldn't keep? He was looking at me now, years of friendship apparently dissolving in real time. Marcus, come on. I said, but I sounded defeated even to. We've been friends for 10 years. Don't do this. Friends don't lie to each other for months. He back. Friends don't use their sisters as emotional dumping grounds for their relationship problems. Friends don't stand in front of everyone they love and pretend to be something they're not. His words were slurring now, but they hit their target every time. Sarah pulled off her engagement ring and dropped it at my feet. The small clink it made hitting the floor was the loudest sound in the room. We're done, she said simply, and started walking toward the exit. Her mom followed, me a look of pure disgust. Her dad stopped next to me for a second, like he was deciding whether to say something, then just shook his head and walked away. One by one our guests started to leave. No one knew what to say to me. Some me dirty looks, others just avoided eye contact entirely. My college buddies patted me on the shoulder awkwardly before heading out, probably already planning how they were going to tell this story to people who weren't there. The greatest hits of my humiliation would be shared in group chats and social media posts before I even got home. My family was the worst part. Mom crying, dad disappointed, my sister asking, how could do this to her, like I was a stranger she'd never met before. They left without saying goodbye, and I knew it would be weeks before any of them would want to talk to me again. Soon it was just me, Marcus, and the catering staff cleaning what should have been the happiest night of our lives. Marcus was sitting at one of the decorated tables, still drinking, looking as destroyed as I felt. Why did it have to do it like that? I asked him. Why in front of everyone? He looked at me with bloodshot eyes. Because we're never going to tell her the truth. Because she deserved to know before she married. Because my sister has been crying for weeks thinking she was in love with someone who was emotionally unavailable, not realizing he was just and who was using her to avoid dealing with his real relationship. I sat down across from him, feeling older than I'd ever felt before. I know I didn't just, Marcus said, nuked entire, and dragged Sarah and Jessica down with. My sister quit her job because she can't face seeing every day. Sarah's gonna need therapy to trust anyone again. Families are humiliated. And for what? Some attention from someone new. I didn't have an answer for that, because there wasn't one that made sense. I'd destroyed everything good in my for something that wasn't even real. A fantasy relationship with someone who probably would have gotten bored with me too once the excitement wore off. The catering staff finished cleaning around us, clearly wanting us to leave so they could close. I helped Marcus to his car and called him an Uber. And he didn't say another word to me before getting in. 10 years of friendship gone. Just like everything else. I drove home to an empty apartment. Sarah had packed a bag while we were at the party and left her key on the kitchen counter. The silence was deafening after hours of being surrounded by people, and I found walking through rooms that suddenly felt like they belonged to someone else. Her coffee mug in the sink, her book on the nightstand, her shampoo in the shower. Evidence of a we'd built together that I'd single-handedly destroyed. The social media fallout started immediately. People had taken photos at the party, videos of Marcus's revelation, pictures of Sarah's face when she realized the extent of my betrayal. By midnight, the story was everywhere. Tagged photos I couldn't remove, comments I couldn't delete, a permanent record of the moment I became the villain in my own love story. My phone buzzed constantly with texts. Some from friends asking if it was true, others from people I barely knew who'd heard through the grapevine. A few were supportive in that awkward way people are when they don't know what to say. Most were just curious, vultures picking at the carcass of my reputation. I turned my phone off and sat in the dark, trying to process what my look like now. Work was a nightmare. Jessica had already requested a transfer to a different department so I didn't have to face her directly, but everyone knew. The whispers followed me down hallways, conversations stopped when I entered rooms, and my boss called me into his office to discuss maintaining professionalism during personal difficulties. I was now radioactive, someone people crossed the street to avoid. The worst part was how quickly I became irrelevant to everyone who'd mattered. Sarah blocked me on everything, changed her number, moved back in with her parents. Her friends who'd been my friends too acted like I didn't exist. Invitations stopped coming. Group chats went quiet when I posted. I realized how much of my social had been built around being half of a couple. And without Sarah, I was just a cheater with nothing interesting to say. My family tried to be supportive, but I could see the disappointment in their eyes every time they looked at me. Mom would ask how I was doing in that careful voice people use when they're trying not to make things worse. Dad avoided talking about relationships entirely, which for a man who used to brag about Sarah like she was his own daughter, felt like a sentence. Marcus and I were done. 10 years of friendship, gone overnight. He'd been my best man, my wingman, the guy who knew all my secrets and had always had my back. Now he was just another person who couldn't stand the sight of me. I tried texting him a few times, apologizing, explaining, begging for forgiveness, but he never responded. The silence was louder than any angry response would have been. I started seeing a therapist, not because I wanted to fix, but because the loneliness was crushing me and I needed someone to talk to who was legally obligated not to judge me. Dr. Reynolds was patient and professional, but I could tell even she was struggling with my case. How to help someone who had everything and it away for nothing. What we're hoping to gain from the relationship with Jessica? She asked during one session, and I realized I'd never actually thought about it that deeply. Attention, I guess. Excitement, the feeling of being wanted by someone new. Saying it out loud made it sound even more pathetic than it was in my head. And was it worth it? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. I lost everything. My fiancé, my best friend, my reputation, my family's respect. I'm sitting alone in an apartment that feels like a museum of my failures, talking to a therapist because I'm too for anyone else to be around. What do you think? She made notes in her pad, probably documenting another session with a textbook case of self-sabotage and narcissistic behavior. I was a cautionary tale now, a story people would tell their friends about what happens when don't appreciate what have. The months dragged by. Sarah got engaged to someone else, a guy from her yoga class who probably appreciated everything I'd taken for granted. I found out through social media, of course, because stalking X's online presence is apparently what losers do when they have nothing else going on. She looked happy in the photos, genuinely happy in a way I could remember her being with me toward the end. Jessica moved across the country for a new job. Marcus's LinkedIn showed they were both thriving, building lives that didn't include any reminders of the damage I'd caused. I was the only one still stuck in the wreckage, still trying to figure out how to move forward when every step reminded me of what I'd lost. Dating was impossible. Women could sense the desperation, the damage, the way I carried my shame like a scarlet letter. The few dates I went on ended with polite excuses and blocked numbers. Word had gotten around about what I'd done, and in a city the size of Portland, reputation matters. I was damaged goods, a cheater with emotional baggage and trust issues. I moved to a smaller apartment, sold furniture that reminded me too much of the I'd had with Sarah. Minimalism wasn't a choice. It was what happened when had to start over with nothing but guilt and a credit score that reflected poor decision making. The new place was sterile and sad, like a hotel room for someone who'd given on going home. Work became my only escape, but even there I was isolated. Colleagues were professional but distant, and I knew I'd never be promoted or trusted with important projects again. My reputation preceded me everywhere, a warning label that read, "Will betray trust for temporary validation." The holidays were brutal. Thanksgiving alone, Christmas alone, New Year's Eve watching Netflix and ordering Chinese takeout, while other people celebrated with families and friends who still loved them. I thought about reaching out to old friends, but the thought of explaining what I'd become, how far I'd fallen, was too to attempt. I started writing a letter to Sarah trying to explain, to apologize properly, to take full responsibility for the pain I'd caused. But every draft sounded selfish, like I was trying to make feel better rather than actually expressing remorse. After dozens of attempts, I realized there was nothing I could say that would matter. The damage was done, and words were just words from someone who'd already proven they couldn't be trusted. Some nights I lay awake thinking about parallel universes where I'd made different choices, where I'd deleted Jessica's number after the first inappropriate text, where I'd talked to Sarah about feeling disconnected instead of seeking validation from someone else, where I'd been the man she deserved instead of the disappointment I became. But those universes didn't exist. This was my reality, sitting alone in an empty apartment at 32 years old, with nothing to show for my but a trail of broken relationships and burned bridges. I'd had everything anyone could want, and I'd traded it all for a few months of feeling special to someone who was never really mine to begin with. The engagement photos came down. The wedding dress Sarah had bought went back to the store. The deposit on the venue was lost. The invitations we'd ordered got thrown away. All the tangible evidence of our future together got erased, like it had never existed, like I'd never been worth loving at all. And maybe that was the truth I'd been avoiding all along. Maybe I'd cheated because deep down, I didn't believe I deserved Sarah's love. Maybe I'd sabotaged the best thing in because I was more comfortable being the villain than trying to be the hero in someone else's story. Now I'm just a cautionary tale, a story people tell about what happens when don't appreciate what have. I'm the guy who had it all and it away for nothing. The friend who can't be trusted, the ex who serves as a reminder of what not to settle for. Every morning I wake to the consequences of my choices, and every night I go to sleep knowing I did this too. The loneliness isn't punishment for my sins, it's just the natural result of being someone no one wants to be around. I destroyed everything I touched, and now I get to live with the wreckage forever, because some mistakes don't get forgiven and some bridges don't get rebuilt. Some people don't deserve second chances, and I'm learning that I might be one of them. The worst part isn't the loneliness or the shame or the regret. It's knowing that somewhere out there, Sarah is building a beautiful with someone who deserves her, while I'm still here, exactly where I belong alone with my choices, wondering if this hollow ache in my chest is what the rest of my is going to feel like.